titled it Group Therapy. And so like any group therapy, welcome. I'm not just Brandon, a user of DLP, I'm also apparently really good at it. So hopefully what I can share with you today, you can take back to your own shops and maybe get your program off and going and running and doing more than what you are doing with it today. Or maybe just like any good group therapy, if you think you've got it bad and you start listening to this, you realize, my God, I might just have a great program going on. I don't know. So what you can, I got to figure out the pointer system here. So what we're going to go over today is a little bit of how it works, why you should be using it, maybe some tips to convince management, right? I don't know if anybody here has any problems talking to your leadership about why this is so important. And then how to do DLP in maybe some creative ways. Some good examples, maybe some not so good examples, some downright dirty business. And then how to look overall just enhance security once you actually get going in your DLP program. You start finding things, you want to do things about it. Now before I start, I got to understand who I'm speaking to. So, show of hands, how many people here have a current data loss prevention product program in your environment? Okay, about 20%. How many people here are getting ready to try and do a DLP program? Okay, one. Come on in.
Sorry.
No, welcome to group therapy. It's an inside joke. I'm sorry I missed it. And then how many here are just here because it seemed like the coolest of the tracks that you were given a choice to go to? All right, a little ego boost here to make me feel better. All right, well, first off, before we get going, you know, there's going to be parts of this that are more prescriptive to where I'm going to be talking and giving you some guidance. There are going to be breaks within the presentation where I'm really looking for your input. So I call it group therapy. Feel free to chime in. I'll let you know when those moments are because every program is going to be a little different depending on where you work, customers, your environment. So I always like to start everything off with a joke, right? Because I can't be serious. You know those what my mom thinks I do, what my brother thinks I do, what my kids think I do thing. Data loss prevention is no different, right? You know, what society thinks of us is glorified mall cops. My family seems to think I'm this great Sherlock Holmes. I don't. Okay. My boss, now I like to think my boss definitely thinks I do better than just sleep on the job. My customers, on the other hand, you know, they always think that I'm out trying to find the bad stuff. Of course, I think I'm cool as can be with my glasses and my little earpiece. And then lastly, what I really do is just sit in front of the screen all day looking for patterns. That's the reality of the situation. It's actually not. So what is DLP? Just real quick. There's really two kinds of data loss prevention, right? It's when things leave your organization, we call that data loss. It's gone. However, when things are shared inappropriately within the organization, that's more of a leak. It's not leaving the organization, but it's not staying where it should be. You know, a lot of people, when they think of data loss prevention, if they're having trouble understanding the concept, one of the things you can relay back to them is that, hey, you know when you go to Target, or you go to Walmart, or you go wherever those fancy places are, and they've got the stalls and the gates and the security guards and the tags and everything, it's the electronic version of that in a lot of ways. We're trying to keep this information from leaving the store. We're trying to keep you from losing money or business or being an embarrassment. Now you might ask yourself, why is it vital? And if you need some talking points for people that just don't know, well, number one, you know, regulatory compliance is always a good reason, right? You know, a lot of times you can justify getting a DLP program in because you're being told to. You have to have it. Problem is, if you don't have that, you know, one of the negative side effects could be you could find yourself some legal consequences, right? There have been a lot of lawsuits that have stemmed from intellectual property loss, privacy loss, things like that, because people did not do the basics to protect that information. Same thing with intellectual property. More and more, business is shifting, you know, and it's not in every sector, but more and more I'm seeing that the value of an organization is in the intellectual property, the intangible stuff. It's not necessarily that tangible asset that you're worried about someone stealing. It's the idea, the plan, the recipe, the patent. You know, you want to make sure that information stays within your organization. How many people here, just curiosity, out of curiosity, work in the pharmaceutical industry? You make drugs, sell drugs. Nobody? Healthcare? Oh yeah. Smell the HIPAA. Yeah, so my HIPAA friends out there, you've got big worries that, you know, there's fines. You don't want OCR coming down on you because you've lost some patient records. And, you know, one of the biggest breaches in 2015 was Anthem. I'll give Anthem some credit. They lost my information. They did have a very slick website to tell me, you know, we lost your information, but it's going to be okay. So we're going to give you this credit monitoring business, which coincidentally called me about 20 minutes after lunch saying there had been some activity. So I have a follow-up to do after work. But again, when you lose IP, you could potentially face a loss of competitive advantage. Now you'll probably notice here, I'm not geeking out yet. I'm not talking all these fancy DLP terms. I'm really talking business. Because in a lot of ways, that is a cornerstone of your successful program. You've got to relate it back to the business. If you can't speak their language, you're not going to get that far. Prevent disclosures. You know, that really goes towards the upper two. And again, loss of public perception. How good does it look for the Office of Performance or Personnel Management when they lose everybody's records? Yeah, thanks guys, you lost my records too. That's awesome. Did I get credit protection from OPM? No, because the government's really good at making the rules, just not following the rules. I don't know if you've ever noticed that about that. So, what are some strengths and weaknesses of a good DLP program? First off, you know, a lot of these programs you can get out of the box. Symantec, McAfee, you know, there's a dozen of them out there. And more companies that deal with transported data are offering you DLP-like capabilities. Well, many of them are central administration, policy. They're always touted as being easy to deploy. And that is true. Most of them are very easy to deploy. Emphasis on keyword deploy. And some of them even ship with some anti-tampering products, which is important if you've got a very constrained environment that is heavily regulated, and you have to make sure your products are not being tampered with. PCI environments, for example. And they work best, though, when you have policies and data classification. On the flip side, you know, oftentimes most DLP products are limited to what they can actually extract out of something, right? Now, there is a shift coming in OCR and some other things, like Symantec just unveiled. They're going to be able to start doing some text detection on images, which is huge. Because that's always been sort of an easy way to get data out. Scan it and send it out. Nobody can read it. I mean, unless you have some dedicated OCR things going on. But there's always a way to get past DLP. They're usually really expensive too, right? I mean, in an age where 2015 saw so many breaches in it, more so than the previous 4 years, you know, the salespeople are, and no offense, I love my salespeople, you guys are good, but they're talking to my bosses and the executives saying, you need this protection, you need to wear this helmet when you ride the bike, otherwise you're going to fall and crack your skull. And people are listening to it because now they're seeing other things happen in the industry. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But I want everybody to keep something in mind. DLP as a product is great, but if you don't have a program, that product is not going to do you a lot of good. And by program, I mean there's a lot more than just putting in a Symantec system and starting to scan. You've got to actually start doing some things before that. You need to do some risk assessments to justify it. You should have a governance body that should really be over the whole thing so they understand what they're getting out of it, and they can advocate for you as well when you run into those executive roadblocks. Compliance is always a good thing. Policies are excellent. You know, DLP is a tool like a hammer, right? You're going to use it to build something. If you don't have a blueprint to model it against, you're going to build a really wonky looking birdhouse, okay? Same thing with discovery and remediation. Those are always the end steps. And most people like to do this backwards. Have you noticed that? The people that have the DLP in their shops, they like to go backwards for some reason. I've tried to go backwards. Let me tell you, it doesn't work very well at all. In fact, the only reason I got good at doing this was because I failed a few times before I actually figured it out and got it right. You know, there's some other ways you can do things. You know, this is more of a helpful slide just to give you an idea of various steps that go along with trying to figure out what to do. You know, you've got to identify what to protect. That's always a core pillar of IT in general, whether you're security, operations. If you don't have good asset control, how can you know what to protect? How do you know what you have to protect? Numbers, composition, location. So having good asset control is important, but that includes your data. And most people miss that step. They know I got 5,000 notebooks. That's great. What's your data look like? I don't know. Okay, we'll have to figure that out. One of the big steps into getting into any program and doing all the stuff I just talked about is you gotta get management on board. Now, sometimes management comes to you because they go to a Gartner seminar or something like that. And apparently the speaker before me was a little short. Better at adjusting moments. All right. They'll go to a Gartner seminar, they'll hear the buzzword, they'll come back, hey, let's do DLP. Well, that's great. That's good. Ride the catalyst. Okay? Advise them that they need to do some prior steps like, hey, let's get a governance committee together. Let's look at our policies and define our data. And if we haven't done that already, let's make the effort. But if it's more or less them coming by you and they're not as bought in and you need some management ammo, these are some things that you can talk to them about. You know, the Identity Theft Resource Center is a good place to go get some stats on various sectors and records lost. Hey, work. Oh, yeah, sorry. Another one is the risk-based security website. Now, they also offer some nice reporting. And what's interesting about their reporting is they're focused here on where was the threat vector, in or out. In most cases, it's kind of almost a draw. You know, in my personal experience, 2 out of every 3 incidents I investigated was always an internal job, be it an accident, very few malicious, but very rarely was it actually somebody from the outside breaking in and doing something. It's mostly Joe Blow at his computer who doesn't know any better, doing something bad, and he doesn't even know he's doing it. What's really interesting in that same report is they realized that in 2015, if you notice something, there's a cycle here. So 89% of those records lost were electronic. You know, in the physical security world, that's part of our domains. We always learn, hey, you got to put locks on cabinets, locks on doors, key passes here and there. But we don't seem to be doing the same thing too much with our data. Yet that's the predominant vector by which it's stolen. You know, breachlevelindex.com is another good place to go. This is just an example. And what I like these is because they're management friendly. They're pretty. Management doesn't necessarily need to know the ins and outs and the details of stuff. They want to know big numbers. Because what they're looking to gauge when you talk to them is, what's my exposure risk? How much of a problem is this going to be? And will I get in trouble for this? You know, we talked a little bit about what kind of incidents we have. You know, identity theft seems to be predominant right now, but we're also seeing that with health data because now it's really easy to go, you know, who wants social or credit card numbers? Whatever. I want some health data so I can go make some false claims and get paid. Government is still our friend, thanks to OPM and a few other poorly designed government websites. You know, when you look at the world as a whole in 2015, I mean, I know Americans love to be leaders, but I really don't want to be a leader in this category. So what does that tell us as a group? Perhaps America is not doing the right thing. Or, conversely, we are doing a good job, but we're just the #1 target. Kind of like everybody picks on Windows and not so much on Apple. Now, if they really need some management info, if they're stubborn, you know, let's take into account the experience of one Mr. Target CEO who lost his job after they blew all those records out. And, you know, they even had to send one of their guys to go testify to Senator Al Franken. He's not a fun guy to go talk to. I mean, I know he's a comedian at one point, but he ain't fun. And could you just imagine being in that hot chair? And what did they say? It was the IT people. They always blame the IT people. So what are some of the pitfalls of trying to get through this DLP implementation, right? Well, maybe you get the DLP, you install it, but you don't have a policy. you're going to end up with a glorified network monitoring system. And without a policy to accurately tune to, what you end up with is a very noisy network monitoring system. You see, I mean, has anyone ever tried to use data identifiers or a pattern to recognize social security numbers and web traffic? Anyone ever run into Target.com? I like to pick on Target because they're dumb. They don't know. If anyone's from Target in here, I apologize, but you know, they made their product catalog numbers 3-2- can anyone want to take a guess here what the last combination is? Quattro. 4. That's the same pattern used by Social Security numbers. I'm still working on a little experiment. I'm trying to map everyone's Social Security numbers in the company and do a query back to Target. I want to see what kind of products we are as a people. I bet I'm probably a garden hose myself. I seem to spew a lot. So, but that's just an example of where someone's poor programming choice has directly caused me to not be able to detect accurate Social Security numbers going out to Target. Well, there is a way to get past that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if you don't have any management support, it's just like football, man. Just flag on the play, start over. You're just not going to go anywhere with it. I guarantee you that. I've tried it. It didn't work. I thought I could convince my boss that this was cool. Yeah, I did this POC. It's cool. We can find all this stuff. That's ridiculous. Okay. Why? Because if you don't tune your systems and get out the false positives, do you have a truly trusted system? Or do you have just this noisemaker that looks cool? Management's not going to trust an untrusted system. They're not going to trust a noisy machine. They want something that's going to work. Now, if you expect a plug-and-play solution, you, again, I'm sorry, it's not going to work. A lot of vendors will come in and promise you this. Oh, it's great. Plug it in. We'll have all your stuff in no time. That is great. I've seen them try it. It hasn't quite worked out. It looks good enough to impress people that buy stuff, but not the people that use it. Most importantly, how many people here in their shops actually, show of hands real quick, have an awareness program for people that talks about data classification, talk about how to handle things separately? Okay. Educating the employees is king. Again, I always live by the philosophy, you know, it's a layer 8 world. Now, if you understand the OSI model of networking, it goes from 1 to 7. The 8 part, that's me and you, people actually using it. And unless you can get people to model their behavior correctly, it doesn't matter what kind of controls you put into it. I mean, bar none, you could cut the internet connection, that's about it. They'll do it, unless you tell them not to. And it takes a lot to change the human firewall. Lastly, you're very enthusiastic and you decide, I'm going all in, baby. It's Vegas poker. Turn the block on. That is not going to work. That is going to derail your program quicker, and it'll probably get you walked out the door. I do not advocate turning the block on immediately, because if you don't prepare the environment, the people, the managers, the expectations, because a lot of what you've got to do is tune that product to meet your organization's process needs. And there may be, and believe me, it takes a while. So let's talk about my personal experience for just a minute as an example. Like I said, I've failed a few times. Now, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, but this is more or less about where I work now. And, you know, they did this. They got really excited about this program. They spent the money. They bought it. They put it in. They're doing great, right? Everybody's expecting big things. No, that's not quite how it worked out. It didn't go very well. It continued to not go very well. And then they hired me. Now, I am going to toot my horn a little bit. They hired me, and I'm like, oh, we got to redo this. And we did. We wiped off the current installation, and we started from scratch with the program. And one of the first steps that we did was tune it. We turned it on. We targeted very specific types of data, and we just tuned. And it took a while, because some processes in your organizations may not kick off on a monthly basis or a weekly basis. They may be quarterly. They may be biannual. They just may be yearly. And you've really got to watch for those things. And it takes a lot of work to discover how those things work, especially in institutions. Anyone here work in a place that's mostly inside head knowledge? You know, people don't necessarily write it down. It's always like, hey, what's going on here? Oh, you got to go talk to Joe in finance. He knows all about that. Okay, you go talk to Joe, and he's like, oh, I used to do that. You got to go talk to Sally. She took over. And you find yourself just chasing your tail trying to figure out how this damn script works, or what this process is doing, or why it's even done that way. And most of the time when you do find the people, you're like, why is it done this way? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? It's yours. Well, it's just, it was given to me. That's just how we do it. That's how we're going to do it. That's how we've always done it. Okay. So then you finally arrive at what I call the promised land, right? You're actually able to be effective. Block. In the DLP world, there's the monitoring, and that's all building up, and then the effective world is the block. We can actually start paying dividends to the risk people, saying, hey, it's time to pay off. And that makes you a winner. That's right. I was supposed to have some class. I was going to put my face on there, but he's much better looking, so we'll just stay with that. So let's talk a little bit about some traditional use cases, right? Controlling information, data classification, drive control. Anybody doing any of these things now? You know, some people do use their data loss prevention product as a means to sort of ferret out where the gold is in the kingdom. You know, and that's not a bad way to do it. Okay, if you've got file crawling capability like a Semantic Discover or a McAfee product, something like that, that can go out and actually troll the terabytes or even petabytes in my case of data out there, figure out what's going on. And that's a good way to start, but I wouldn't call it the end game. The big thing is you got to be able to do some data classification. Now, device control is always nice because ultimately you can put all these cool controls in there, and I can just walk in with a USB device and circumvent them all. So if you don't have some kind of a movable media in there, you have a problem controlling the data. But there are some non-traditional use cases. Anyone here actually using the DLP to do employee monitoring? You might not want to raise your hand on this one, depending on who's in the room. You know, I've used it in the past, what I call the naughty word list, right? You know, most products ship with the naughty word list. You know, kind of different things: sexual, cussing, I'm quitting, I'm cheating, I'm sabotaging, I'm what's the word I'm looking for? Espionage, things like that. Some of them are better than others. I've experimented with turning them on at where I'm at. It's kind of worthless, so I just turn them off. But they're not a bad way. In an environment where people are quick to turn over sometimes, it's a good way for you to sort of get that heads up that somebody might be leaving. Same thing with malware detection and blocking. Let me give you some examples. So for the employee using monitoring use cases, right? Maybe somebody decides, you know what, I've had enough of this place, I'm going to leave. What do people always do before they bail? Especially salespeople. Again, no. They got to bring everything. Here's everything I worked on. Here's everything I might need. You know, it's my body of knowledge as a professional that I want to take with me because I can just reuse it. Well, that usually means they're going to read the hell out of your dead work. Maybe their home folder. So in this particular case, maybe you start looking for something that meets a threshold. Like, you know, most times they read, you know, whatever, so-and-so every day, every week. But for some reason, for the last week, I've seen this person spike. Maybe you want to go take a look at what that person's doing, where that information is going. Espionage. You know, again, patterns of read activity, but, you know, they may not fit the baseline. It's not, hey, I'm going to look at my mailbox, and I'm going to look at my group folder, and I'm going to look at my home folder. It's, I might be looking more sporadically. Like, hey, I work in IT. Why am I doing so much reading in the finance folder? Or I work in sales. Why am I doing so much in accounts payable? So that's where having groups within DLP can help you look for those patterns, right? Segregation of duties. Do salespeople need to be looking at accounts payable? Probably not. They probably are more concerned about accounts receivable. Sabotage. Now that's where you start looking for some patterns of write activity. Somebody's actively modifying things. May not be to your knowledge. Same kind of deal. They may not fit the baseline, so you got to look for the outliers. Some programs like Semantic DLP are not as good looking at that as others I've seen. McAfee always had a nice little outlier program I liked, but I had to run it through Excel. And then what I call the HR early warning radar, right? That's that non-professional language. So you're probably asking, why does a DLP person care about this? Well, very important. 90% of the time when I actually get something to get blocked, I got to go to that person that owns the data, and I got to get them on board. There's a little bit of evangelization that goes on, and there's some trust that has to be built. Last one I did was Pro Cards. So we decided, hey, let's go after the Pro Cards because people are screwing it up. We want to see if we can get the Pro Cards blocked, if we'll have a decrease in the number of fraud issues detected on our company cards. So I go talk to the lady. You think she was just like, oh, sure, here's your list? No. She looked at me like I had come to steal her firstborn. And she was not happy about it. So it took a couple of meetings and some trust building in order for me to convince her. And fortunately, I spent 14 years working with Louisville Metro Police Department. So I had a little bit of cred with me that I could use to gain her trust. And I promised her that she would be my partner. So every Monday, I sent her a report. Who violated it? What did they send? And here's a nifty little management graph for you to show your boss. And she loves it. And it's great. I don't have to go chase those users. You know who does it? She does. Look, all I did was give her the means to an end. I'm just a tool. But by doing that, I was able to start blocking those numbers. I've made myself a value add now and not somebody that is causing a distraction or end users to get mad. And here's a situation where we got a bunch of people that are trying to pay bills using their credit card and they're pissed. Guess what? I got the management get out of jail free card on this one. It's a good thing. So one of the ways that you can use DLP to hunt for malware, and this is some typical scenario, right? Junk comes in through the mail of the web, gets circulated on the computers, and then most of the time people are looking to exploit data. They want to get it out of your organization. That's where you can start looking for things. And so if you've got a DLP product that's sitting in line with your firewalls, maybe you're doing some SSL decryption, you're able to look inside those secure streams, or you're integrated as a mail relay, so encryption isn't even a big deal unless you're actually encrypting the message itself. So you remember the Ashley Madison leak? You know, that was a big one, right? All their membership got spewed onto the web. A bunch of, what do they call that when you blackmail? What's that called? There's a better word for that. Anyways, a bunch of guys got basically tuned up by people looking to extort some money from them by blasting them out on the web that, you know, they're a cheater. Well, think about it. We're in a generation now where we still have employees in our workplaces. Their first work address, their first work email address was their first email address. They didn't, you know, this is before we had ISPs at home. This is somebody coming to work and it's like, congratulations, you have an email address. Oh, okay. And they've kept it, and that is, they don't see a difference between doing work and personal on it. So why not, if they're going to sign up for maybe a shady service, use their work address? They don't think anything of it. So I'm looking for these. Fortunately, I didn't find any. We have good, you know, good morality at work. But that's another example of where you can take an outbreak, or you can take a recent breach of a questionable matter, and you can look for that activity to make sure that your employees are not getting extorted. You can help them. Because, I mean, if I was going to get extorted, and I like go to my boss, I need some help. No, I don't think I want him to know that I've been, you know, inappropriately using the website. Or how about finding crypto malware ransom notes? You know, that's the problem with crypto malware is that it's so quickly evolving, right? But what's the one constant about it? I mean, the antivirus people are having trouble keeping up with the detections. The IDSs are having trouble keeping up with the endpoints involved in it. But you know, they all seem to have a common thing, and they like to leave a ransom note where they go. I look for the ransom notes. Now, is that as great as blocking it? No. But it's my early warning radar that we got a big problem, because the earlier you stop crypto malware, the better your end result's going to be, because the longer you let it go, the more data it's going to encrypt, which equates out to the long restoration time. Now, I can't confirm nor deny that any of my current employers have had this problem, but I have been witness to this before, and it's brutal. Thank God for sand snapshots. Or how about obfuscation methods? Anyone familiar with obfuscation, where people sort of translate their code into something else to sneak it in and then recompile it when they get there? A lot of times those commands they would use would trick or maybe trick something in an AV, but if you know what to look for, this is all based on essentially building my own malware rules, right? It's based on a couple premises. If it has a text pattern, you can probably detect it. But you always got to make sure you test your rules, okay? Don't always put a rule out there and just say, we're good. Test it, or you'll get burned. I subscribe to a number of threat intelligence services. I like Krebs a lot. He focuses on, I mean, this is not something that's very broad, very quick. It takes a lot of work on your part to do this, because you got to extract the information from these services, and you got to figure out how can you look for it in your environment. But a lot of times DLP is plugged into a lot of ins and outs, and it gives you an extra layer of visibility that some of these other detection engines don't necessarily offer you. Or they're controlled by other groups that you don't have access to, and DLP usually falls under the purview of security. Then you got things like US CERT, InfoGuard, SANS has a blog, Krebs has a good one, Proofpoint. Emerging threats is what I'm working on. We subscribe to emerging threats. I'm trying to figure out how can I extract that list into an actual, whatever it is, 9 million IP list, and then use it as an endpoint file on my DLP clients. I mean, how many people enforce, show of hands real quick, when their notebooks go off network, are your users allowed to connect to any wireless network and go to any website, or do you force them back through VPN? Yeah, I see a lot of no's, I see some yeses. So how the heck are you watching where the data is going when they go into the shadows? Well, if you put a DLP agent on their machine, it doesn't care which network they're attached to. But when you leave a corporate network, you mostly leave all the parent's house, right? There's no cool rules, there's no cool firewalls. It's just whatever you got on your machine, you're on your own. Well, by putting an emerging threats list on there, you can kind of extend that coverage to the machine, no matter where they are. And you get some nice alerts from it, too, if they trip it. It's just writing the script to actually get that to work has been a challenge. Apparently turning CIDR notation into an actual list of IPs, it's hard for this old geek. But you always got to know how to circumvent your own rules in case you overdo it, and you got to quickly get to something. And the problem is your policies are going to get stale real quick. Malware, breaches, things like that, they're all fads. They change. That Ashley Madison rule hasn't been active for months. Now, real quick detection tweak. That's the teaser. Anyone seen this before? You know what this is. If you do, you're not allowed to participate. A big part of DLP, what makes it difficult, is detection. Finding what you're looking for. Does anyone see the cat in this? Raise your hand if you see the cat. There's a cat there. Just don't point. Alright. Let me show you where the cat's at. You see it now? This is kitty's head, ears, body. He just happens to blend perfectly with the environment. Not unlike us sifting through terabytes of data every day trying to find that one string, or that one phrase, or that one file. Same challenge. So, what are some of the best ways to do it? Well, I like to think of it, there's two real ways to do it. There's precise, and there's imprecise. Imprecise is using patterns like data identifiers and semantic, right? Hey, match the pattern of a social security number. Well, I've already told you about the target story, so you know how well that worked. But what about precise methods? Let me give you some examples of precise methods that work very well. I've got a customer database of about 9.5 million customers that has their social and their driver's license. You get a copy of it every month. And I put it into DLP. And I encrypt it in DLP. So if you come raid my DLP servers, you're just going to end up with a bunch of encrypted indexes. But why that's important is because now I'm detecting on what is known good information versus a pattern. So I still get the hits from targets sometimes. Ironically, a few of our people match product IDs. Go figure. The randomness of it. But I don't get the 150, 250 false positives every day. And it's proven. It's worked out real well. And I partnered with our customer service manager. She was fully on board with this before we started. And she liked the concept because her people were accidentally replying out, including people's socials. And since HB 5 and HB 232 for Kentucky have passed, and what is it, KRS 365, 762, I don't know, I forget. All that stuff is now reportable. That you have PII for people going out the door without protection. So being able to do that is important. But you know, there are some problems with like images versus text. Obviously, text is very easy. Images are difficult. But again, machine learning and what they call vector machine learning, which are newer technologies where they index and they see how things are used on a computer over time, can build these VML models that are very accurate. So it just depends on what type of data you're trying to protect. Sound crash? Apparently, no internet means bad. All right. Now, there's always a bunch of ways to get around DLP. And it's kind of funny, encryption, right? What do we always tell people as security professionals? If you want to protect it, what do? Encrypt it. Problem is, if you encrypt it, you can't inspect it. So, you know, and there's a lot of unmonitored vectors. I talked about that shadow spot in people's networks where you take corporate assets off the network and you allow them to go anywhere you want without being monitored. That's an unmonitored vector. Everybody remember when you first got your first iPhone hooked up at work, right? What was so cool about it? You could do Gmail and corporate mail at the same time, right? Like, you could get a Gmail from somebody, and if you just wanted to send it into work, you just forwarded it. But you just changed the from address to your own. So, I mean, it doesn't even come from Gmail. It just comes from your phone to the corporate mail. It pivots. You know, now we got MDMs out there that forbid that. We talk about containerizing information as a way to get it through. But there are some things called advanced evasion techniques, right? And those are, they're brutal, and they're very hard to protect against. And so you are always going to have a problem with people breaking data up. You know, if I wanted to steal your credit card numbers, you know what I would do? I would take the first 4 digits of the list, put it in its own file, the second 4 digits, the third 4 digits. And then even better, I would change zeros to A's, you know, ones to B's. Next thing you know, you got alphabet soup, and it doesn't match your credit card pattern. How do you defend against that? That's pretty strong. That's so basic of a kung fu move, but it works. So what is the problem? How do you even defend against that stuff? Well, the biggest thing is this. It's data disorganization and network architecture. I mean, you know, most of the stuff is just, my God, my kid's room is more organized than some of these file servers I've run across. You know, and we're not just talking about the stuff at rest, we're talking about the stuff in motion. How many people are familiar with doing DLP for data in use? Anyone heard of that one before? A couple of you? Essentially, the difference is at rest, it's sitting static, you're waiting to hit it. In use is when, or in motion is when it's being moved around between hosts to be used. And then in use is, let's think of a database, right? I'm in a database, and I'm doing things between files or fields and tables. How do you know, manipulate, how do you protect someone from manipulating that? And that's a whole different ballgame. Most people just stick with use and motion. Well, first things, you can't protect what you don't know. You've heard me complain about, you know, the lack of asset management. Well, most people, you got to have some kind of labeling system, right? I mean, go to a doctor's office. It's always against the wall. You see the whole chart index, right? Blue labels, green labels, yellow labels, they all mean different things. You go to look at most of our file systems, and it's messy, it's spaghetti junction. It's usually done by group who owns the data. And then they do whatever they want. It's all mixed out. How many times have you done an audit on a file system and find out, hey, do you realize that everyone's performance reports is like, read everyone? Oh, well, no. Wait, we should fix that. Yes, we don't want everybody reading everyone else's performance report. Those kinds of things. So using some kind of labeling system, whether it's a pseudo-military one, your own proprietary one, confidential versus privileged versus public, something is better than nothing. You know, ultimately what you want to arrive at is you want to be able to take that messy file cabinet and you got to put it together and get it organized. And that's the part most people don't want to do. That's the pain of the program, is getting people to retroactively clean up their rooms. They'd rather just kind of like, can we just do it going forward? The other part is the networks. You know, traditionally networks, if you're in an established organization, you know, you've probably paid out big money at one point, built a network, and then you piecemeal it through, maybe do a modern refresh every once in a while, but the architecture doesn't necessarily change. Most people just say, Oh, we'll just put a firewall on. We'll just put a firewall. It's cool. Yeah, we're protected now. We're safe. Oh, okay. But in a lot of networks that you look at, if you want to do data loss prevention, you're talking about controlling the funneling of information, who has access to it. It's more than just, let's throw a DLP program out there and look for this stuff. You've got to actually set up those security zones, those trust and untrusted zones. And then that way, you understand it's easier to do DLP when you know the common, like you have a known object. So I have these databases of my customers, known good data, a precise method. But I also know that the data is coming from this subnet, this VLAN, this file server. Again, I know I should treat that information as confidential. It doesn't matter what's in it, it's confidential. So again, look at your big hits, your email, your roaming clients, your mobile devices, your internet. Those are all major vectors for this stuff, right? And then just do some basic stuff. Don't do a flat VLAN, create your zones, do use proxies and firewalls. Look at these stores, Target. Target's a great example. It's not unlike a network, right? How many ways are into Target and out? Just one. In and out. And there's guards or what are they called? Thank you, sensors. Yeah, it's interactive today. There's sensors at these places that check every little product going in and out of there for that tag. But yet, when you look at some of these networks, it's like, well, we send our web traffic through a proxy, we send our FTP through a firewall, and we have a point-to-point here. And with all these ingress and egress vectors, how are we supposed to monitor them all? I mean, we're multiplying the problem with us. So, again, it's in the network. Now, here's where I'm kind of curious. How many people here allow cloud services from their company assets? I mean, you may even use the cloud asset. I'm just saying, how many people here, you can go to Gmail and G Drive and all that stuff? Wow. No. Yeah. It was very restricted at where I worked. It's kind of open where I'm at. Kind of surprised. What about access to non-business websites? Most people do it, right? I hate to say this, but the internet has almost become the right of the people. Even though you're at work and I don't know, it's this work-life blend thing. Maybe I'm getting old, but I don't use personal stuff when I'm at work. Maybe that's also because I'm on the security team and I know what they look for, so. Which kind of begs the next question. Do you even monitor those channels? I mean, if you're using SSL decryption, the problem is, and we had a great discussion about this earlier, is that most people are starting to pin their certificates so that you cannot do SSL decryption man in the middle for them. Which is great for privacy, bad for inspection. And does anyone even have a policy for their personal devices? I mean, there's a reason why Brandon has 2 phones. I got the bat phone, it's where all my personal business is. I got the work phone. It's lavender clean. I don't have anything on there except work. Why? Because I spent 14 years working for a government that would sniff all the things going on the phone. They expose more information than you know. So my question is, are there any real solutions for everybody? Number one, you've got to start getting in front of this stuff with requiring classification of data. We do this now with our projects. We get a project, we all meet up. One of the first things out of my mouth is, what are we dealing with? Confidential, privileged, what are you going to put into this so I know how to treat it? And that allows me to build in those controls that support the classification. It's a holistic approach. Again, I have the classifications to support my policies. When I rebuilt our DLP platform, I basically made all the rules mirror our data classification policy. And of course, you build those policies to protect the business. Don't forget to get buy-in from the top, or you're going to fall down. When you forget to get buy-in from the top, it's like marrying a girl without asking the dad for permission. Just not starting off on the right foot. I made that mistake too, by the way. Don't do it. And make it a win. Always highlight the stakeholder benefit. So like I partnered with our person who does the pro cards. I partnered with our customer service manager who did the data records for our customers. You make it about them. You enable them to look good. By keeping those incidents down and by helping her with training, her crew looks better. By helping our ProCard person, rein in this use. Hopefully we're going to make her look good when it comes to the number of fraud items she's got to deal with. And if you can't monitor it, my rule is don't allow it. I've yet to actually get this one to fly anywhere that I've been, but it's not a bad idea. I mean, what you don't know can hurt you in the data loss world. So with that, I'm just going to say it starts with simple things like teaching your users to lock desktops. And why I changed this was because I got zinged on this earlier this week. We have one gentleman at work who is notorious. Kelly knows what I'm talking about. If you leave your desktop unlocked, you will be sending a love note to the group. It's usually a beautiful sonnet. And unfortunately, it was my turn. And so, I had stepped away for just a minute and got zinged. And they're, of course, very, very cordial about replying back. So, I like that little meme, Learn Step Star plans were stolen because he didn't lock his desktop. So here's a copy of the reference material that I used with a lot of this stuff. When you're constructing your argument, you'll probably want to go out and get updated copies of these. The stats vary depending on the collection method and the analyzation behind it. So you're going to see some discrepancies when you compare different providers of reports. Oh, this one says 48%, the other one says 52%. Yeah, either one works. I think the difference is that there's a lot of data being lost due to people's inability to do the right thing. So, with that being said, that's it. That concludes our presentation. We have 4 minutes before we gotta get out. Let's talk about some questions. Anybody got any questions? Sorry.
I want to start in the baselining with the data discovery. But I was wondering, is there a quick, down and dirty way to do some file server auditing?
Are you a Windows box or are you? Oh. When the wind blows. No, I've had a lot of trouble with Windows file auditing in the past using seams and things because, the central theme of a Windows audit, it's really like 4 events that come through that you did something or didn't do it. And it's that handle ID that makes it a challenge. You get a stream of events. I mean, I could fill a security log in about 3 minutes with 3,000 people hitting a file server. Just boom, boom, boom. So is there an easy way to do it? Not really. Now, Symantec has, and I'm not advocating Symantec, this is vendor agnostic, it's just the products I work with. So I've got DLP on one side. What it does is it looks at the classification side of it. It has a partner product called Data Insight. They're actually using EMC's, what's it called again? I don't know, their audit method to send them events back to the Data Insight. What it does is it figures out who's doing what. How much of it are they doing? And then DLP just injects, hey, what classification do you have? That's how I'm auditing what people are doing. And I'm saying, no one's touching this data for a while. We're just leaving like 300 gigs of sensitive data laying around. Is there a good reason for it? Turns out there actually is. Well, for compliance reasons, we need to keep this data. Okay, never mind. Yeah, I'm sure. That's why I call group therapy. I see a lot of head knocking. Yes, they tell me this too. But that's a good question. You might want to look for some freeware products to do that. I don't know what kind of environment you have, what size, or how open they are to bringing freeware stuff in there. But a lot of times it's just sort of. I get it. A lot of people like to bring the discover part in. That's where you can work with your partners and your resellers to hopefully maybe get a proof of concept where they do come in and they do a crawl for you just to give you enough information to realize big problem, little problem. Am I well organized? Am I off base a bit? I don't know, because that's usually, a very inexpensive way to do it. So, it's a good question. Thank you. Miss, you have one too.
So, we had somebody come in and audit our DLP like a year ago. They said the same thing, you should monitor everything as useful. So, we turned on monitoring for everything, even the encrypted paths that we had for data should have been stored sensitive. Mm-hmm. So, we do get a lot of noise because I know these users are accessing this data that has sensitive data in it, whether it be credit cards, social security, whatever we classify as sensitive. And of course, I want to monitor still have the capability of monitoring, but how do you reduce the noise?
That's a really good question. So establishing baselines is an important part of doing that. So in a baseline in this particular case would be, who are the authorized peoples to do this? And can we maybe sort of not alert for them? We know they're going to be doing this on a regular basis in this group of folders of this location. So with those two put together, I would say maybe we don't send an email. We might just register an incident and close it. We know it's there. That way, if there's ever a question, we can go back and say, well, yeah, they did, but that's normal. But we do want to write an incident if somebody outside that group tries to do that. That would be going off baseline. You know, I've got a couple people that have some data they sent out that is critical, and I've had to write some exclusions and minimize their impact because they're noisy. But they're expected. But it took a while for me to figure out who they were by analyzing the data. So, good question. Baselining is hard to do. It takes a lot of time, and people kind of get frustrated with you because they're like, when's it going to be ready? When's it going to be ready? When's it going to be ready? When I'm done, chill. Now, that's a very streetish way to say that. You can't obviously talk like that to your manager. No, you got to use terms like, well, if I was to conclude the baselining too early, that would result in a very high disproportionate rate of false positives, resulting in an unnecessary amount of calls to you, and especially a possibility of irritating upper management, or something like that.
That's where it's not sitting, because they wanted it to have all the information, so just trying to figure out what's better.
I honestly, I mean, we suffer in this, I don't even know if that works. One of the problems in IT security in general is anyone work with SIEMs, security incident event monitors? Okay. What are they? Noisy.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the human tendency to do when you get noisy? Tune it out. But then you're missing the point of it. So if you have something that fires on a regular basis, but you need to keep it for compliance, don't fire an email, don't do a rule or an alert for it. Just put it down on the baseline. Just record it for compliance sake. Look for the stuff that matters. Okay, look for the stuff that is not right or you've not seen before. We've had to do a lot of tuning with our IDS, our SIEM, our DLP, and it's a non-stop process because it's a reflection of your environment and human behavior changes, business changes. You've got to upkeep those rules. That is the hardest part. I'm only allowed to spend maybe 5-6 hours a week tuning the system. I got these other things I got to do, so it's just. Some weeks I feel like I'm brain damaged. Other weeks I'm like, I do good. I remember I made a mistake with a rule, and next thing you know, that thing was detecting on every packet. I fired off, I think, 850,000 emails in a span of about 30 minutes. And I corrected it within the first 2 minutes, but the system queued so many damn incidents, and they were hating on me. I thought they were going to, and they weren't going to fire me or anything, but my boss was mad because I basically drained his iPhone, I think, in about 20 minutes. Yeah, that's where the whole testing of the rules comes into play. Like, maybe we shouldn't fire an email on this one. Well, we'll do that next.
What DLP solution do you use?
So I've had a lot of experience with the McAfee endpoint products with their DLP 9 series. I'm currently using the Symantec. It used to be known as Vontu. It's getting purchased by Symantec. They rebranded it to DLP. Now we're up to 14. 14.5 looks cool. 14.5 or 14.6 is actually where they start talking about bringing in that OCR technology. But it's kind of rudimentary. You have to scan known forms, and then they know the form, and they look for changes to the form, like people filling it out. So you have to identify which fields. It's not quite there yet. It's good. It's better than what we got. It can actually rip into CAD drawings, which we're a utility, so we do a lot of CAD drawings. Those are notorious for hard to find information out. So yeah, it's not perfect. You're never going to get 100%. But what really helps is when you're in that monitor mode, if you can catch a few people doing some not so cool things. I caught somebody that had 5,000 social security numbers of other people. And that was a great catalyst for me to go to my boss and be like, winner, winner, chicken dinner, we got it. And next thing you know, I'm blocking. I hate to say that, but a lot of this stuff is catalyst driven. It's human nature, right? I mean, look, we tell people to wear bike helmets, right? How many people wear bike helmets? Not a lot. We tell people to wear life vests when they're on a boat. I see people on the Ohio all the time, no life vests. You can tell people to do the right thing, but until they've had a real close call, either law enforcement or they wreck their bike or whatever, they get a ticket, they're not going to change their behavior. No. Work's going to be different. Really shouldn't send those social security numbers out. I'll never get a problem.
So on a outside of the data center and on the workstations and laptops, you get about 3,500. Is there a product that can go out there and do a quick data discovery? Is that where that Symantec?
Symantec's data discovery part, the discover, is a slow crawl.
That's what I was going to.
It's
Because it
slow.
looked like it was going to take like 2 hours per.
Oh,
About.
it depends on the machines, you know, I mean, obviously when you got SSDs, things go right, but think about it, the premise of any data loss prevention, or any antivirus, anything like that is, you shim into that I/O stack, so as things pass through it, it looks at it. And that's why people hate the DLP agents for the most part, because things like Outlook do not respond very well to delays that it does not understand. It's like, hey, I got this data, where the hell is it? Where is it? Oh, here it is. You know, so Outlook likes to freeze.
Yeah, I was thinking more about the baselining. So the way to baseline those machines.
Oh God, it took me probably about 3 months to troll all our data on just file servers.
Did you use the Symantec?
Oh yeah. But I mean, I had to fight a lot of battles because most of these